Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into In the Clutch episode 8. Guys, we're just a week away from playoff action, 1 week to go. We're in the red zone of the playoffs, if you could say it that way, and really excited. I know you guys are too. We've got one more week to talk about regular season.
Yeah, the red zone of the regular season, and I like that term a lot. And it's interesting, this week nine, there's going to be a lot of good games. Big 12 title to be decided between Peoria High Normal Community. I think that is the game to watch in the area, but there's also some other good games coming as well. A couple 4-4 teams like P&D, DMAC Morton looking to all secure their playoff bids. We'll have broadcasts of DMAC's and Morton's game this week. So, Morton will be on CIProud.com against Washington. DMAC, our small town throwdown, ClutchSportsIL.com as well. But really, for the most part, only three teams really fighting for a playoff spot at this point. I think most of the 5-win teams, if not all of them, I'm almost certain that all of the 5-win teams will make the playoffs still, regardless. So, but still something to play for though in week 9. I don't want to get complacent. You want to win for playoff seeding, lots more at stake.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the red zone analogy there, Teddy. In this proverbial red zone, some teams in our area they need a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to get into the playoffs, and some teams are up by 30 plus, and unfortunately, some teams are down by 30 plus. But yeah, still, as John said, a lot to play for. Even if you are undefeated, you still want that top seed. You want to get those easier matchups in round 1 and 2. So yeah, lots to talk about, lots to be excited about for sure.
Yeah, I think if you've already clinched your playoff bid, you want to get a better seed, but you also just want to go into the playoffs rolling. You want to have momentum. You want to feel, confident in what you're doing. So certainly a big week for everybody who's still in the playoff mix.
It definitely is, and week 9 right around the corner. But we all know in order to talk about week 9, we have to talk about week 8 first. So I think we should probably start with the WBD game of the week, Peoria High and Bloomington. Wesley, I'm sorry, I know you're from, you're go to Bloomington, but Peoria High did come out on top in that one, 44-28. Overall, just a great game from both sides. Although Bloomington did lose by 2 scores, a lot closer than what the score entailed, I think. And a lot of it was credited to that third quarter start from the Peoria High Lions, and 2 onside kick recoveries, 3 straight touchdowns, and just really didn't give Bloomington a chance to even answer back early on.
I think when you go into the playoffs, that's kind of what Peoria High could upset maybe some better teams with is those freak plays. I think, they'll probably have a pretty favorable matchup in week 1, but when you look deeper into the playoffs, maybe when they're not the favorite in those games, big plays like recovering an onside kick or going for it on 4th and 20 and getting it or things like that could help them to beat some teams that they're not favored against.
Yeah, for sure, Wesley. And you really hit the nail right on the head there. Peoria High, not only is their offense extremely athletic, extremely deep, extremely talented, but they just show you something that you've never seen before because they're the only team that I know of in the state that has that type of play. They always, like you said, Wesley, they always go for it. Always onside kicks. They always go for two. You're never going to see them just give up a possession, and that can really throw a wrench in these opposing teams' defensive game plans. And I do believe that it's going to take Peoria High a few weeks into November, if I had to take a guess right now.
Yeah, definitely. And and excuse me there, but yeah, no, I mean Peoria High, really that game was decided so much by momentum. They were up 14-0. They were down 20-14 after the second quarter. And then, third quarter they got that touchdown run by Breon Green. And then really from there is those back-to-back onside kicks that just crippled Bloomington, sucked the life out of their sideline. And, Bloomington barely even touched the ball until about 3 or 4 minutes left in the third quarter after halftime. So, I mean, they just didn't have a chance to really score really in the second half at all. And before you know it, Peoria High is up by, 2 or 3 scores. And so, for me, the unsung hero for Peoria High, we talked so much about, the guys like Breon Green, like TQ Webb, like Tatarion Pollard, and all of those guys on defense too, Cam Peterson, Dorsey Doss. The unsung hero for Peoria High, though, is their kicker, Chris Varela, who was responsible for those onside kicks. I mean, dropped some absolute beauties in there. You couldn't kick an onside better than what he did, multiple times against Bloomington last week. So again, it was just classic Peoria High football. and it makes them so hard to beat. I know you guys mentioned, teams they may not be favored against. I think there's going to be very few teams that Peoria High wouldn't be favored against in the playoffs. I see them as probably most likely a 3 or 4 seed, maybe even a 1. I think if they beat Normal Community this week.
Like you said, though, with the kicker, just how good he played. We kind of talked about this after the broadcast. When Peoria High is always going for two, like 2 point conversions after a touchdown, they probably get a lot of practice reps because they know they're not going to kick a point after attempt. You can probably just go and do onside kicks all practice, and that's what makes them so good at it, man. They're just unstoppable on special teams in that regard, and they've done that for years. And it seems like this year has been a little bit less with the coaching change, but they definitely can always go back to it. That's just in the roots of Peoria High. They're just so good at special teams, defense, like they all three facets of the game. Peoria High really prioritize, and so you gotta give them credit. So unfortunately for Bloomington, they do take a loss to Peoria High, but they hung with them all the way through. Some other games around the area. Got Morton with a big win over Dunlap. Dunlap with a 2-game losing streak now after starting off 5-1, 5-1 or 5-2.
5-1.
5-1. So 2-game losing streak now to two really good teams, obviously, but they're looking to have a bounce back win here in week 9. But credit to Morton on a great game. Isaac Davis, sorry, with a 96-yard rushing touchdown to start the third quarter, and another one later on. He was a big proponent for their win in week 8.
Yeah, Morton, really what I'm looking to in week 9 in their game against Washington that we'll be broadcasting is, how well they get their receivers involved in the game. And, it's, kind of, as far as been running the ball for Morton, again, I, haven't seen their updated stats yet, but, really a lot of their rushing leaders are their quarterback, Isaac Davis, who's been phenomenal this year as a sophomore, plus their wide receivers, who accounted for, I believe, 4 rushing touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, last week. I think Julian Alexander had 2, Cole Rinkenberger had 2, including a long one. So, it really hasn't been quite as much the running backs for Morton. It's been, the other, I guess, non-running backs for them that have been doing a lot of offense. Obviously, they've been able to throw the ball too, but Morton is a very good team. I was talking with Washington's head coach Todd Stevens just a few hours ago. He said they're only a couple points away from being 6-2. With those other 2 losses would have came to 2 state-ranked teams in Mahomet, Seymour, and Rochelle. So Washington can't afford to take Morton, not seriously as a good Potters team. I would love to see the Potters make the playoffs because I think they deserve it this year. And also, though, if Washington wins, we'd see back-to-back Mid-Atlantic title winners for the first time in about a decade or so, which is kind of a crazy stat. The fact that no one is won repeat titles since then. So it should be a good game. And I was impressed with Morton's win over Dunlap.
Yeah, for sure. And I won't talk too much about Morton because I will be talking about them later in a different segment. But what I think Morton really needs to do, they have to get that cohesiveness of the offense together. It seems like in a lot of their losses, especially their big ones, one part of their offense is working and the other parts are not. If it all works together and they can string stuff together, the Potters are a really, really tough team to beat because it's not often that they beat themselves, and that alone can take you well into November. So we're excited to see what the Potters have up their sleeve for their Week 9 game against Washington and perhaps into the playoffs.
Some other games around the area, just quick ones I want to talk about was Tri-Valley over Eureka. I mean, that was a big one. They're both two really, really good teams. Eureka went in undefeated. Tri-Valley went in at 6-1. And 29-12 was the final in that one. That was a really big one. Farmington had a big game against Lewiston Co-op. It's like 47-6. They remain undefeated. The only undefeated team left in our coverage area. So credit to the Farmers. They've had a great season. Have been so fun to watch as well. Are there any other games that stick out to you guys besides the one I listed?
Yeah, Prince. For me, real quick, as jump in. Princeville, obviously, unfortunately, a loss to Rushville Industry, and I know last week our Michael Savoy so famously said Princes became kings with a win over Stark County. But maybe Bright Lights got to maybe a little bit. Rushville Industry is still a very good team. Them, Stark County, and Princeville all tied atop the Lincoln Trail Prairie Land Small right now, but. Looking for a bounce back for Princeville. They had a big week 9 game against Anwar Weathersfield, but I was a bit surprised to see the Princes drop that game. But I do think, though, that I think they can bounce back.
Yeah, for sure. And I had pinned right at the top of my list was that Tri Valley Eureka game, Teddy. Tri Valley, I mean, huge statement win on Cole Klein, 30 carries, 218 rushing yards, huge 40-yard touchdown run. Cade Danko scored 2 touchdowns himself, one of them on a 90-yard kickoff return. And the other one I have on my list was a PND taking a crushing loss to Christian Brothers. And if you've never heard of Christian Brothers, I don't blame you because they're in Missouri. And kind of just a weird scheduling. I don't know what happened there. If this has been planned for years, I have no idea. But Christian Brothers comes to Peoria, and that is a really, really, really good team that's going to be playing deep into the playoffs in the Missouri high school athletics. But it's not time to panic if you're an Irish fan because they have a favorable matchup against Danville at Dozer Park week 9. And if they win that, they will be in the playoffs and could maybe make some noise. It wouldn't surprise me. So it's kind of a strange game. The whole dynamic of that just kind of caught my eye. So yeah, big loss for PND, but like I said, don't panic.
Wesley, was there a game that stood out to you?
I think just the game we covered, not a new one, but Bloomington at Peoria High. I think we saw a lot of the fireworks that are in the Big 12. Some really good football, a lot of big plays on both sides, and that'll be a really good matchup this week with Peoria High and Normal Community for the conference.
Well, and real quick too, how about a little deja vu for the DMAC Chiefs? Remember we had Cody Myers on here a couple of weeks ago, and he said that multiple times, including last year, they were kind of had their backs against the wall, needed a big win late in the season to stay playoff eligible, and then they needed to win in week 9 to clinch. Well, DMAC got that big win this past week. They beat Clinton 38-20. That was an impressive win from the Chiefs. Chuck Hathaway, Max Eccles were both great in that game, and DMAC's got it again like you said, Wesley with or Dalton with P&D's game against Danville, a winnable game against Ridgeview Lexington. I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed win, but you would like to much rather to face a 3-5 or a 2-6 team rather than having to face a team like Eureka or Tri Valley in week 9. So I know the Chiefs, I like them to get that 5th win. Again, I'm not going to guarantee it, but that was a big, big win for DMAX just to keep them alive and potentially secure that playoff spot.
Definitely was one of the better teams, better games in the area. DMAC's been kind of not necessarily just based off their skill because they are a good team, but they've been a fun team to follow, especially when we had him, Cody Myers, on the podcast. Just how energetic he was, man! It's such a fun team to follow and kind of like rooting for him at all times. And so, obviously, a big win last week. But one thing I want to say, we're going through 8 weeks of the regular season into week 9, close to playoffs, and we wanted to talk about some overall throughout the season superlatives. Okay. So we have a couple of these listed off. All of you guys should have these categories filled out. We got best offense, best defense, best head coach, most fun, and most likely to go on a Cinderella run. Does anybody want to start, or do you guys want me to?
How do we want to do it? Do we want to do everyone? We do one category, everyone says theirs, and move on to the next, or do we go all 5 at the
I
same
like that
time?
one too. I like that one too. All right, let's start with best offense then.
I could start. My best offense of the year it's normal U High, and they are averaging they are 6-2. Pardon me. They're averaging 48 points on the year. Now I could just stop right there, and that would make my point, right? But even in their losses, which were to 2 playoff teams, by the way, they scored 38 and 30 points respectively in the both games that they lost. One of them was non-con, and one of them was a conference loss. Quarterback Alec Wheeland has just absurd numbers throughout the year. Rhett Lynch compliments him on the ground. And in the air, they have Cade Cunningham, not the basketball player, Cade Cunningham, and AJ Holden as well is one of Wheeland's favorite targets. And it all just works. It's like poetry in motion watching that normal UI offense go. And like I said, 2 losses to very, very good teams, but that they are my best offense throughout the year. Just insane stuff from the Pioneers.
A good pick.
That's a good pick indeed. I love UI's offense as well. And for me, I'm going to go a team that maybe I didn't quite expect to have such a dominant offense, at least one that puts up so many points at the start of the year. Mine is Elmwood Brimfield. And it's crazy because the Trojans have only thrown a handful of passes, maybe in the range of maybe 20 or so, about, as estimated off the top of my head. They only throw the ball maybe a couple times a game. and they run the ball about 50 to 60 times a game. And you look at the points that they put up 41, 42, 71, 60, 55. I mean, it's crazy that the numbers that they have had this year, and so much of it has been Bo Windish and Matthew Glenn, dangerous backfield duo. I think that they are by far the best backfield duo in the area. Obviously, Pure High is a very good one as well with Pollard and Kendall Netters. It's got to be for me Elmwood Brimfield. I mean, I've just been so just pleasantly surprised to see the numbers that they've put up on offense this year. Look at the total numbers. They've got 327 points through 8 games. That's over 40. Very impressed with a largely one-dimensional, but still very dominant EB offense. That's what makes it even more impressive.
Peoria.
Go ahead.
I had Peoria High. They've only had one game this year, scoring less than 44 points, and clearly they trust that offense because they're not going to punt the ball. Going for 2 after touchdowns. I mean, they really rely on their offense, and we see Breon Green at quarterback be really dangerous. And I think they've had the best offense in the area, just a ton of speed at every position on the offense. I mean, they've put up numbers, 58, 86, 66. So it's a really dangerous offense. And I mean, they've had, some good defensive showings, but they really don't need to with how high powered their offense is.
Wesley, I'm gonna go right off what you're saying. I think great minds think alike here. I had Peoria High as my best offense as well. 52 points per game through the first 8 weeks is insanity. I mean, that you just don't see that ever. And they've done it. They've done it year after year after year. You mentioned Breon Green. I think he's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the area. I mean, his ability to scramble and throw the ball is up there with anybody. And like I said, in the area, it's just been such a key piece for them. And other key pieces they have, Webb, Raper, Green, Pollard, Kendall Netters, like you mentioned. There's just so many different weapons that they can go to, and that's what makes Peoria High so dangerous. I'm gonna do a little snake draft here, though. I'm gonna go straight to best defense. For best defense for me, I chose Washington. Washington throughout the whole season have 100 points allowed on the season, which is really good. You might be able to find teams that have lower than that, but another thing I have here, 62 of those points came from the first 2 weeks. Since then, no one has been able to score more than 10 points on Washington. They've been so dominant in like middle line I play, and I'm excited to see what they can do in the playoffs because they proved it, not proved us wrong. Because like we've said in the past, we knew Washington was going to be good, but after those first 2 weeks, it was a little like, is this the same Washington team? Are they as good as they were last year? And they proved everybody wrong. They're equally as good, and they've done great all season long defensively. Thanks to their pass rush and their secondary, they've just been great.
I got normal community. I got normal community. I mean, they already have 2 shutouts, and it's always so hard to put up points against them. And they haven't shied away from tough games. I mean, they went at Kankakee in the non-conference, even down a few players. So they've had a lot of tough matchups, and they've shut down some offenses that we've seen put up a lot of points, and it'll be very interesting to see them against Peoria High. Something's got to give in that game.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a good pick, Wesley. I was also going to pick normal community as well. And the only reason I didn't pick normal community for my best offense because community is offense is right up there with all the teams that we mentioned in terms of how strong they are, how many weapons they have, and their points per game average. So definitely don't want to forget about the Ironmen there. But again, to me, their defense has really stood out as well. Again, they don't really give up many points per game. Normal community just doesn't really play in close games that much. They had that close one against Kankakee, which I think, again, even despite the loss, is going to benefit them because you look at all their other games have been decided by 43, 41, 56, 42, 30, 59, and 43. Those are all running clock wins right there. And again, obviously part of it's due to their offense, but look at, defense has been equally strong as well. Guys like AJ Montoya, arguably one of the best defensive players in the entire area for the Ironmen, just one of them. And so again, defense has been strong for them. If I had to pick another team, honorable mention, I'm going to go with Eureka. Their defense has been strong this year. They pitched 3 shutouts, only allowed more than 23 points just once. That was last week. So Hornets defense has been very strong too this year.
Yeah, and my pick, I'm going to pivot to kind of a smaller school and another one that has 2 shutouts on the year, and that's Farmington. Farmington, being a small school, a lot of their guys, if not almost all of them, have to go both ways. You got to play offense and defense just because your roster size is smaller, because your school is smaller. But they do that. That's a really tough test, and they passed that test with flying colors. They, like I said, 2 shutouts. They give up an average of 10.5 points per game, and they're undefeated. So if you're undefeated, I think you have to generally think that you have a good defense, at least a competent defense, right? And also, Farmington has just beat the snot out of some teams they've played. So yeah, they give up 10.5 points per game, which is already crazy. But think about how much of those points have come in quote unquote garbage time. There's just another layer to that Farmington defense, that Farmington team that I think is going to have a real shot at the 2A state title. And if they do, their defense is going to play a massive part. It's been absolutely stellar all season long.
Certainly. And Dalton, do you want to go ahead and just continue on that snake? Go to your best head coach.
Yeah, my best head coach is Sam Durley of East Peoria, the first year coach. He was Sam Durley took over a program that was really, really struggling. I'm talking like 0-2 wins in the past 7 or 8 or 9 seasons. I didn't count, but I know East Peoria has had their struggles. And he got the East Peoria community just fired up. He brought them together some way, somehow. He's like a wizard. I don't know how he did it. And in his first year has been absolutely insane. And that's really, really, really hard to do when you're taking over a program that's kind of been in the basement for quite some time. And then they're 4-4 with a chance to go to the playoffs next week if they could pull out a win against Pekin. So, and even if they don't, so say they lose that game to Pekin and they don't get one of the 4 and 5 bids, I don't think it's much to hang your head about, because, like I said, he's a first year coach. He's already done so much for this program. He's gotten them more wins already than they've had in a decade plus. So, like I said, even if they don't go to the playoffs, you should be scared of Sam Durley in the future of these Peoria Raiders. I think that's a team that can really, really contend in the conference over the next 1, 2, 3+ years. As long as he's there, I'm all in on the Raiders.
It's a good point, and so much of it comes down to just getting guys out for football too as well. Just being a guy that kids want to play for. And Sam Durley is definitely one of those guys, so that's a good pick, Dalton. And then for me, I'm going to go with another first-year head coach. I think again, if you can have success in your first year, that really means a lot. Even if there is still some players and systems left in place since last year, but for me, I'm going to go with Niall Mulcahy from Bloomington. It's been so good to see the Purple Raiders flourish, and not just be good, but be, ranked in the, top 10 for, multiple weeks of the season. I know that those rankings are, not always the most meaningful. They're just kind of numbered next to your name, but the fact that it still means something. And especially when you're in your first year as a head coach, taking Bloomington in one of his better years in recent memory. He's done a nice job over there as well, and you just kind of see that the players embrace him. He likes to play his brand of football and everything. So excited to see what he's got coming in the future, because I know Bloomington's got some key seniors. Excited to see what they're going to be like next year if they can sustain that success. But I think this has been a very, very good year for the Purple Raiders.
I also had Niall Mulcahy. I think Bloomington just snuck into the playoffs last year for the first time since 2018, but I think this year has just been a completely different level. Last year they were all right and they made the playoffs, and then they got routed by Chatham Glenwood. And I think this is a year where they feel like they're really a great team, and they were in contention for the Big 12, and like they can make some noise in the playoffs. And I think when you look at a head coach or a manager, it kind of comes down to two things: it's game management and player management. And we've definitely seen his game management, his play calling really succeed this year, but also just being around some of the Bloomington guys. I feel like they've really rallied behind him. Definitely helped him that he had been in the program before he stepped into being a head coach, but still his first year as a head coach. And I think the guys have really bought into the mentality he's brought, and that's really helped the Raiders.
Wesley, I'm going to stick with you, not the Bloomington head coach, but just in the Bloomington Normal area. I'm going to go Nathan Fincham of Normal West. He's led them to their 15th straight winning record season, showed elite coaching in that Peoria High game. I've talked about it before on the podcast. That Peoria High game, you can always tell when a team is well coached, but you can't always see it live in game. And that was the first time this season that it really clicked in my head, like, oh my goodness, like that was that was like a crazy thought out play. When Peoria High and Normal West played, in case you don't know, it was insanely windy. And Peoria High had the ball at the end of the first, the end of the second quarter. I think it was the end of the first. And they were going against the wind. And it was about to be a turnover on downs, or the clock was about to change. It was like a third down. And they called a timeout to keep Peoria High with the wind. Next play, Peoria High throws the ball against the wind, couldn't really get anything going, underthrown, and they get the ball back with the wind to their back. So that was a kind of something like that, just the manipulation of the clock to be able to keep the ball out of Peoria High's like hands in a good situation was crazy to think about. And just like overall throughout the whole season, they've had a great year, 6-2, and the only two losses have come to like very good teams. So Normal West is Nathan Fincham is the coach of the year for me. And continuing on to most fun. I think some of you guys might have interpreted this, and that's fine if you did, as like most fun team to watch. But I'm kind of going with East Peoria on this one. I haven't really got to see a whole lot of what East Peoria has done on the field, but just the story of East Peoria that we've been able to talk about, just how good they've been this year, especially those first four games. They were like the talk of the podcast. It seemed like it was like we were all cheering for East Peoria to clinch the playoffs. We'll see if they can do that this week against Pekin. But regardless, they were a very fun team this season.
I want to give Washington some love. I like they're undefeated in the Mid Illini. I really like what they did early facing Caneland and Kankakee, and they lost those first couple of games, and then they went into the Mid Illini. I don't know if teams around the league were sleeping on them because they went 0-2 in the non-conference, but to come in and then win 6 straight in the conference, I think if you're a team that you have the talent to make the playoffs, giving yourself those tough matchups in the non-conference is always a good idea to get yourselves ready come playoff time.
Definitely. And Dalton, I know we were talking beforehand about what our picks were for this, and I can't remember if we had the same pick or not. So I'll let you go first on this one, and then I'll say mine for most.
We do not have the same pick, but I'm happy to go. I have Princeville, the Princes out of 1A, and me and Brock Stotler did their game against Stark County that they won by a landslide a few weeks ago. And I had fun because of not only what was going on the field was entertaining, but the crowd was just insane. I've said it time and time again because I came from a small school myself. I know it just means more in a small school. And to be honest, it can be more fun at a small school sometimes. But on the field, Princeville has something that pretty much, I don't want to say all because I know that's not true, but most other 1A schools don't have. And that's the way they can hurt you on offense because they can run the ball and they can pass the ball equally as efficiently. You just don't see that across the board in 1A schools. And I believe that especially those teams that they're going to play in round 1, round 2, maybe round 3, they really aren't going to have too much experience going up against teams with as dynamic as fun of an offense as Princeville has. So for quite a few reasons, the Princes are my pick. I think they bounced back after their surprise loss last week. They finished the season 8-1. They make a deep run in the playoffs.
That's a good pick. And for me, I'm going to go with Normal U High. Now we talked about them earlier and their offense being so strong. And that's part of the reason why I picked them as my most fun team. Obviously, we saw them in week 2 against Bloomington, which was just a phenomenal game. Alec Weiland led his team on a late scoring drive to make that a 3-point game. And you can never really count the Pioneers out of it because you knew how dangerous their offense was. They can be a quick strike team. They can throw the ball as many as 50 times per game. You don't really see that much in the high school level. So I know U High is super fun to watch. They've also just been fun. And it's kind of a fun season for them, right? They had that close loss to Bloomington. Then they come back and they trounce MacArthur. They trounce Lincoln. They lose a 1-possession game to Rochester. And then they come back the next week and beat Glenwood, who was state ranked by 20 points. And the Titans were never really even close in that game. So it's been kind of, slightly up and down for U High, but definitely more ups than downs for them. And they're a very fun team to watch. So they're my pick for that. And I guess since we are doing kind of that snake draft style, I guess I'll start for most likely to make a Cinderella run in the playoffs. I couldn't pick. I'm gonna go with 2 teams. 1, Metamora. 2, Bloomington Central Catholic. Metamora plays very well in the playoffs every year. I believe they've won in the playoffs in the first round. I think now 2 straight years. I think that I wouldn't even count them a Cinderella team because I think they will be a higher seed, which is part of the reason why I think they can make a deep run. But coming in at 7-2, that's an average playoff record. But I think Metamora can be very dangerous. They look like they're getting a little bit healthier now. Jadon Cranford had a phenomenal game last week, and I really do like the Redbirds. They're a team that always plays well in November, so I think that we could see the Redbirds potentially as far as the quarterfinals, semifinals, maybe even deeper than that. And then for BCC again, they come in 5-3 right now. Some close losses to them: 3 points to Monticello, one to PBL. They play in such a tough conference. I think you put them in class. I think they're most likely going to be in 2A. I think they're going to make a deep run.
Yeah, yeah, and I can go next. I've talked about them already, but my team is Morton. Of course, to guarantee themselves a playoff spot, they'll have to win next week. But even if they don't, I kind of like their chances to be one of those few 4 and 5 teams that get a bid. Only time will tell if that happens. But if they do, I like their athleticism. I like the offense. Like I said, if they can really work together and improve on their cohesiveness as an offensive unit, they're going to be tough to beat, and they're going to be a team that none of the top seeds are going to want to see in the playoffs. And also, just building off that big win over Dunlap last week, Morton needed a statement win, and they got it in a big, big, big way over the Eagles. And that screams to me like they're a team that rises to the occasion. And what do you have to do when you're in the playoffs? You have to rise to the occasion. So I believe in the Potters. I think they can make some noise in the playoffs, and they're my pick for the Cinderella run.
I agree with John on Bloomington Central Catholic. They're 5-3, which isn't a particularly great record, but we talked about how good the Illini Prairie is, and just they lost a lot of guys going into this season. And head coach Kevin Brought talked about how they wanted to kind of ride their defense while their offense got going. And I just think they have a lot of talented pieces, but it's been work in progress this season trying to put them together, and I think they're starting to figure it out. So by the end of the season, I think they'll be ready to make a run.
Bloomington Central Catholic is definitely a team I could see making a run. I got to see them earlier on in the season. Even though they didn't come out with a win, they still look very good, so I can totally see that one. The team I picked was Peoria Notre Dame, though. Um, so through John's the article John wrote about the bracketology, they're projected to play Waterloo in week 1 of the playoffs. Okay, Waterloo is an 8-1 team. They're really good, obviously. So they have a tough first round matchup. But of all the teams that can do it, I think it's Peoria and Notre Dame. They lost to Normal West by only 6 points. Same with Peoria High, they lost by 6 points. Those are two very, very good teams. So they can contend with these good teams. And Waterloo as a team where they scraped by against a 3-5 Mount Vernon 35-28, and Centrella, who's 5-3, which is right around the range of Peoria Notre Dame, they won by just 1 point. So we'll see how that matchup goes. Even if they don't even play Waterloo, that could entirely be out the window. But regardless of that, I think Peoria Notre Dame has the talent to be able to compete with those top teams, and potentially make a run. I know we did have something about pleasant surprises this season, but we're probably gonna have to hold that one, guys. We're running a little bit short on time. But overall, let's go talk about some Week 9 matchups. Obviously, we got our game of the week. Another one I wanted to touch on was Normal Community and Peoria High. That one's one that's gonna be very anticipated. 7-1, number 6 and 7A Normal Community versus 7-1, number 5 and 5A Peoria High. That game's gonna be huge.
Yeah, Pure High actually rankings just released today. We're recording this on Wednesday night, but Pure High is now the number 4 team in Class 5A. Normal Community somehow dropped to number 7, even after beating Centennial 40-6 last week. I was a bit puzzled that they fell spot in this week's rankings, especially given that St. Rita, who passed them up, beat a lower team. So I was confused by that, but either way, going to be a great game. Big 12 title on the line, like we talked about, great offenses and great defenses as well. Again, I mentioned in the broadcast last week, Peoria High is extremely hard to beat, even for Normal Community. And really, the only things that usually get in the Lions' way, if they do lose, is usually either the elements or penalties. If as long as it's a nice night outside, Peoria High isn't hampered by wind or rain or anything like that, and they can keep the penalties to a minimum. I do like the Lions' chances, honestly. I know Community is a very hard team to beat. If I had to say, I would probably say that they have a very, very slight edge because they're at home, but that game should be phenomenal.
Yeah,
And
and then I
one
can
other one. Go ahead.
go ahead, Wesley.
Uh, I think I would take Normal Community that one by a little bit bigger of a margin than John says. I think as long as they don't have any blunders in that game, they should be the favorite. But that's not, it's easier said than done when you're playing Peoria High. They kind of force a lot of errors. Talked about, for Bloomington, yeah, you never, are really going to be okay with giving up two straight onside kicks. But those are also two great onside kicks. They got speed and a lot of talent. They can really force some mistakes. So I think Community, I think, should be the favorite, but Peoria High certainly could wreak some havoc and pull that one out.
Definitely agree on that one, Wesley. And mine, I'm a Princeville podcast apparently, but I have a Princeville's game against Anawan Weathersfield here in Week 9 circled, and then the bottom line here being 8-1 looks a lot prettier than 7-2, especially after losing a game you weren't expecting to lose last week. If you're Princeville, and when you get into the playoffs, seeding is everything. Like I said earlier, you want that easier first round or second round matchup, but it's not going to be easy against Anawan Weathersfield. I mean, that's a team. Anawan Weathersfield lost to Farmington, who I believe is still number 1 in 2A. They lost to Farmington, number 2 in 2A. They lost to Farmington 8-6, which is one of the weirder scores that I've heard. But yeah, Princeville got to capitalize on it in a game that you should win and carry momentum into the playoffs.
Yeah, so many great games this week. I feel like we saved really the best for last. Other ones I just want to touch on real quick before we wrap up. Metamora Dunlap, huge game for seeding for both teams. I think that Dunlap is going to absolutely need to win that game to host in the first round. I could see Metamora losing and still being able to host. But that game, I think the winner of that game has a good shot at hosting the first round. Two teams we don't talk about a ton on the podcast, Canton and Limestone. I know they're winless, but a win going into next season, it feels so very good. That'll be one to watch, as well as two teams, again, not going to make the playoffs, but going to need to win, Fieldcrest and Hayworth.
Definitely a lot of big games, and I know all of us are excited. 1 week away from playoff football. Can't wait. Hopefully, we get some good playoff games going as well. But until then, week 9 coming up. I'm Teddy Ball, joined by Jonathan Michael, Wesley Stombaugh, and Dalton Carmien. We appreciate you guys tuning in to our final regular season episode. So thank you guys, and we'll see you all next time.